site within 48 hours. So we will have that there for you. So we will be taking questions later in the presentation, and you can either put your question in the chat box, or up at the top of the screen there is a little icon for you to raise your hand. If you prefer to ask your question, we will unmute you and you can ask it that way. So you can utilize the hand if you'd rather speak your question. If you're comfortable typing, you can type it in the chat box, and we will go over that at the end of the presentation. Also, when you exit out later on, when this is complete, you will be forwarded to an evaluation. Please take the time to fill out that evaluation. As I said earlier, your feedback is really important to us, and we want to be able to bring you other important and informative webinars. So I want to then begin by introducing you to Laura Arrington. Laura is a Family and Youth Education Coordinator for Starbridge, which is a parent center in Rochester, New York, and we have collaborated with her for this presentation. So let's go ahead and begin. Laura, are you there?
I'm here. Thanks, Dawn. I appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for taking the time to join us today. Thank you for your information on the age of your child. That was very helpful for me, and as we go along, that kind of gives me some insight into our audience as well. Today we're going to talk about talking to your child about their disability, and we're going to talk about the when, the how, and the why. So it's really about starting that conversation with your son or daughter on their disability. So with that, I'd like to share with you a little information about my son. My son's name is John, and John loves to draw. He loves music. He has a son and a brother. He loves to go bowling. He loves to go to the mall, and if you ever see me at the mall, we will have 100 exact pennies throwing into the fountains at the mall. He loves to read books. He loves to go on vacation. And John has autism. There are many things about my son. He is made up of many pieces, and autism is just one of those pieces. This is who John is. Enjoying vacation, by the way. We're in Plymouth, Massachusetts. That's the Mayflower in the back. But it's really about that their disability does not define who they are. And so when we start to talk about our children and their disability, we hope that it helps them better understand who they are. We want them to be able to express how they want to be described. For some people, it could be that they just learn differently. Or for others, they may say, I have a learning disability. And for some, they may want to identify as being a person with autism or being someone who's autistic. I think it's important to remember that it should always be on their terms and how they want to identify themselves. So the big question is, when should I start the conversation? I always say it's never too early and it's never too late to talk to your child about their disability. With that being said, I really think it's important to honor each family's decision on when to start the conversation and when to start this discussion. Having a discussion about your child's disability does not mean that they have to immediately start disclosing their disability to others. We want to honor each family and their decisions. It's a journey. So what it looks like for my family may look different from your family, and we really do want to respect each family. So with that, we have a polling question going on. And we're getting some information. Have you spoken to your child about their disability? And it looks like we have 73. It looks like most of them are in. 72% have said yes, and 28% have said no. Oh, no, we're still getting a few more in. Okay, I think we're done. Are we finished with the poll? Looks like 73% said yes, and 26% said no. Okay, great. Thank you so much. So why is it important to talk to your child about their disability? I usually encourage people to share a diagnosis or to start the conversation when a student begins commenting on their frustrations of maybe not being like other students, or why is it so much easier for everyone else. And sometimes that usually starts between the ages of 7 and 9, where they start noticing that they're being pulled out for supports and services. Our family started to talk to John about his diagnosis right before adolescence. It's interesting, I purposely picked this slide with the question of why do I have to leave for a test, because I had a discussion with a good friend of mine whose daughter became very angry with her when she learned from her parents in high school that she had an IEP and that she was being pulled, and that's the reason why she needed testing accommodations and why she was being pulled out for tests. She actually didn't want to be pulled out of tests, and she thought it was a punishment because she was always the last person to finish the exam. So I think it's important for children to start participating in their IEP meeting and to sit down and start talking to them about what supports and services do they need to be successful in school. Especially for my friend whose daughter did not want to be pulled out for tests. If it's on the IEP and it says that they're in a separate location, she was 17 years old. She didn't want to be pulled out for tests. So we needed to chat with her about what would be helpful for you when you take this test. So that is the start of the conversation and the start of helping her to also learn to self-advocate. Now with this comes some family concerns or maybe even some fears. So the fear that I always had is, well, what if it upset my son? Or what if they become upset because I didn't tell them sooner? What if they have a question about their disability that I'm just not able to answer? So as family members, we have concerns too. So it's important to even think about that, or maybe talk to a friend about how we would start that discussion, what are our concerns, and what we can do. It's going to be a journey for us. And I think as family members, sometimes we don't always have the perfect answer, but we can help and work through it together with them. So remember, we the parents, we won't live forever. Trust me, I'm trying to figure out how to do this. It's not working out so well. But we really do want our kids to be able to stand up for themselves and self-advocate. And being able to self-advocate also helps them to protect themselves and speak for themselves and allow other people to hear their very valuable voice. It's important for your son or daughter to also understand their disability and how it impacts them, and then to be able to tell people what do they need to be successful in school. And you're going to hear that a lot throughout this presentation. It's really looking to our kids and saying, what would be helpful? What do you need? I know when I work with families and we come up with some really great ideas which may help a student, when we ask the students, sometimes they go, no, that wouldn't work. I don't want to do that. So then we have to be creative. We have to have the students buy in. They know themselves. So we want them to be able to have, again, that valuable voice. So by being able to understand your disability, that helps them to lead to self-advocacy, which provides them full freedom to examine and question things such as health insurance or other benefits that they may have access to. It provides them greater freedom to communicate if there are changes in a particular situation, whatever their living situation is, something that's happening at school. It can also help to improve their self-image when they can advocate for what their needs are. It may allow professionals to be involved and provide supports that they may need, such as at school or employment. It can also increase their comfort level with their disability. It allows them to have a circle of support around them by pulling in other people, such as providers, family members, community members, to help them advocate for themselves. And it also leads to supportive decision making. If a student understands their disability, it will help them understand what supports and services they need. It will help them to be successful, or it'll also allow them to participate fully in very meaningful ways. So I want you to think, does your son or daughter know about their accommodations on their IEP and why they are needed? Do they like the accommodations? Is there something else that may work differently for them? And some examples I'm showing right here are headphones. I know my son will use them when we're out in public at a noisy place. I always allow him to decide whether he wants to use it. They could have the use of what's called Dragon Speak, and that's a software, and I've seen it in businesses. This is something adults could use or students could use, that you speak into it and it actually will print out what you're saying. Use of a calculator, guided notes, audio books for college students and for high school students or elementary students, and time management. All those things are important. And then sometimes I will say, even for myself as a parent, maybe what I think is important to John, he may feel that something else is more important. And that's been a journey for myself to stop and listen to what John needs. So how can adults support students to be self-determined? Well, we can teach our sons or daughters or youth about their disability and assist them to recognize their strengths, their skills, and again, what supports they need to be successful. So by doing this, we're encouraging them to be independent and to develop those skills. It's interesting, I heard this from a good friend of mine, that they said, do you know what the number one thing that parents need to teach their high school students before they leave school? And this is all students. And it's how to wake up from an alarm clock. And I heard that a few years ago, and I quickly recognized that I was waking up my teenage children all the time. And my son uses an alarm clock. My daughter uses her phone, but I did not realize that. And I'm pretty sure she's not going to allow me to go off to college with her. I could try, but I'm not sure they're going to actually let me do it. So I figure she's got to start working on that now. And as well for John, he needs to start working on waking up on his own to an alarm clock. So what we do know is that our kids, they will be making choices. They are. They're making choices every day. So we need to teach them skills such as how to ask for help and what does that look like. Making choices. Expressing an opinion and sharing information. I think a lot of times we kind of teach students with disabilities to always say yes. They're almost not allowed to say no. And saying no is okay. I say no a lot every day. And we need to be able to respect, and not only us respect their choices, but allow the other people that they will come in contact to understand what that their no may mean no, and we need to respect that. We need to encourage our youth to speak up for themselves and not always relying on an adult to do it, not talking for them. I'm going to tell you, I am so guilty of this. I catch myself speaking on behalf of my son all the time. I feel that I'm trying to protect him, but I'm not allowing him to have his voice. And his voice may disagree with someone's opinion or disagree with what someone wants to do. And that's okay for him. I'm allowed to do that. He should be allowed to do that. So with this, it's called teaching self-determination. And self-determination is a concept reflecting the belief that all individuals have the right to direct their own lives, decide where they want to live, who they want to spend time with, who they don't want to spend time with. It is everyone's right. So self-determined people accept themselves, respect themselves, and value themselves for who they are and what they have to offer. We want the possibilities for our children to be limitless. So teaching them how to be self-determined people allows for that. So how do youth exercise self-determination? It's going to start with teaching them to make informed choices. So to think about their future. Where do they want to live? Do we want them to live with us for the rest of their lives? I would love it, but I think that it's probably best that John has some other experiences without living with us. What does he want to do for work? How does he want to spend his leisure time? It's funny, my husband always says that he's going to retire and he's going to start an apple farm, and him and John are going to work on the apple farm. And I'm like, do you think John wants to do that, or do you want to do that? So we always laugh about that, you know, my son is not an outdoors kid, so I really think it's what my husband wants to do. So we are in the process of really seriously thinking about, what does John Arrington want to do, and how does he want to spend his time? It also allows them the ability to start directing their own IEP. We're going to get into more of this in a few minutes, but asking for accommodations, and them to be able to learn how to explain their strengths, their interests, and what their supports and their needs are. And it also allows them to set goals in life, where they want to go and what they want to do. It will also allow them to have some say in the goals on their IEP. Is this goal working for them? Do they understand that goal? It allows them to make choices and be independent and live the life that they want to live. Our kids, as I said, make choices every single day. It doesn't mean we have to agree with them. I know all of us, I'm sure our parents did not agree with all the choices that we made, but that's how we learn. That's how I learned some valuable lessons in my life, by sometimes not making the right choice. And I'm not talking about dangerous choices or choices that may be life-threatening, but I'm talking about allowing them the ability to make mistakes. Setting goals for themselves. If you want to live independently, what skills do we need to get you? What do you need to understand? For us right now, we're working on my son being able to be home for 15 minutes by himself at a time. We've just allowed him to get off the bus because he wanted to be able to come in and get off the bus by himself. But I'm usually 5 minutes behind, and we had to teach him how to get his key out and unlock the door and get inside and be safe. Also, our school district required me to write a note that we keep in his backpack, but I'm okay with that. You know, he's 19, but I wrote the note anyways. I went along, but that's okay. It's part of growing. It also allows youth to take risks, make mistakes, but it also facilitates the process and learning from those mistakes. It's called the dignity of risk. And that allows kids to take risks and make mistakes, like we all did. It's interesting, a few years back, my son's teacher called because when they were in PE, they were out riding their bikes around the school track. And my son decided he wanted to crash his bike into bleachers and other kids' bikes. And so the teacher called and she said, we can't have him doing that. And I said, you're absolutely right. He can't crash his bike into other kids and hurt kids. But when I started to talk to my husband about it, he said, man, when I was like 13, I was like riding my bike off of the shed. You couldn't believe the things I was doing with the bike. And I said, well, maybe you're onto something. What if we decided to take John's bike outside? We actually live on 5 acres, so I go out there and crash it into whatever. You want to crash it into the side of the shed or crash it down this hill? Have at it. And I told his teacher, who was a little worried, and I said, it's going to be okay. Because what I realized is John had never really bumped his knee or scraped his knee. And I had kept him from taking risks because I was worried he was going to get hurt. And what my husband was saying is that all kids fall down and scrape their knee. We have to allow John to be able to do that. Not that I'm going to throw him out onto the pavement, but it's the dignity of risk. So when do we want to start involving students? Well, according to the Individuals with Disability Education Act, IDEA, a student of any age must be invited to participate in their own IEP if a purpose of the meeting will be the consideration of transition services. So really, by law, transition planning for students must begin at age 14. I always think it doesn't hurt to start younger, but at age 14. So if your son or daughter does not want to attend their meeting, you could find other ways. Could they come for 5 minutes? Could you read a prepared statement, or could they do it? Could you record them on their phone talking about their supports and their needs? So we need to start including self-determined goals in the IEP. So what could that look like? Well, some examples are maybe a goal around advocating for themselves. And it can't just say, John will advocate for themselves. I see this all the time on IEPs, and I think, what does that mean? What will that look like? Well, maybe it will be, John will ask for help when he needs to ask, when he doesn't know how to get something started. Or maybe it could be a goal that the student will introduce themselves and talk about their strengths to a familiar teacher or a new teacher or a friend. Or they could practice introducing themselves to a potential, to an employer. We could have the student put together what we call a portfolio. And that's a one-pager with a picture of them with some descriptions about what their strengths are. John is very good with organizing, putting things in date order. And that can be almost used as a mock-up resume. Or the student could request an assistance from a familiar person or an acquaintance or a community member. Again, these can be written into the IEP. The goal really should be of how do we start the steps to empower our children to be their own best advocate. Writing that John Arrington will advocate for himself without all those little steps in between of how will John do that? What does that look like? It has to have more detail around that. So disclosure and self-advocacy is one of the most important decisions that they will make as a person with a disability. And that's the decision of whether or not to tell someone about your disability. So when our children graduate or leave school, they will be, the way you are defined as a person with a disability changes, as do the laws that protect them and what they provide for accommodations. and what they may need in either a post-secondary learning situation or in the workplace. Graduation or exit from high school does not mean that services and accommodations that you needed in high school aren't needed anymore. Lots of young people think once they leave school, the supports and services that were provided by their IEP follows them. They do not. That the academic services and accommodations they received in high school will be needed throughout their life, but in different ways. And you won't have that IEP to back that up. And we're going to talk about that. So the rights and responsibilities under the law is once you graduate or exit high school, you are no longer entitled to services. Rather, you become eligible. And we say that's from entitlement to eligibility. And you need to be eligible for adult services and supports based on your particular situation, your disability, and also your ability to disclose necessary information. So we've been using that term disclosure in the past few slides, and it's really about a decision you make about sharing your information about your disability and to others. So it becomes a very important decision, and it's a very personal decision. And again, I cannot stress that enough to you that it's personal. It will look different for every family, and we all need to respect where everyone is at for that. So, does your child understand how their disability impacts them? Can they explain the impact to teachers or to friends, possible employers, to people in the community, or others from who they may need help from? It's interesting because I do have a friend who has a son with a learning disability, and he was in 11th grade. He was taking a midterm, and he was supposed to get use of laptop. And the people in the school remembered about 30 minutes before the end of this test. And it was a lot of writing. And we all know you have use of laptop for a reason when you have a lot of writing. And his mom and I were talking, and she was actually very upset, which I totally agreed with, that he was not given his accommodation. But I said to her, did he know that he had the ability to ask for the use of laptop? And she said, well, he kept waiting for them to give it to him. And I said, okay, now you told me he's going to go to college in about a year and a half. And she said, yes. And I said, so who will be responsible for that when he goes to college? And she's like, the school? And I said, nope, they won't be. Because once you get into school, once you get into college, if you don't ask for your accommodation, they're not going to give it to you. And I said, I agree with you 100%. They should have given him his accommodation. But let's take this as a learning opportunity for him and help him to start advocating, to say, it is okay for you to ask for this. They're not doing you a favor. You need this for a reason. So let's practice asking for your accommodation. Let's practice what that would look like going up to the teacher. And that was really helpful. So when Regents came around, and that's something, I apologize for New York State, it's other tests that you have to take at the end of the year. At the end of the school year, he had a really big test to take, and they had practiced that. And again, he wasn't getting the use of laptop, but he raised his hand right away and said, I'm supposed to have a laptop for this. And they went, oh my gosh, you're right. And they got right on it. I'm not saying what they did was right, but I'm saying this was an opportunity for him to have this journey of learning how to stand up and ask for the appropriate accommodation and ask for his needs. Okay, so now, this is so fantastic. We're going to hear from a young adult and her success around being able to disclose her disability. So we're going to play an audio for you.
Hi, bear with me. Sorry about that. I had it and I lost it. Okay.
Hi, my name is Alexis Pratt. I'm 21 years old and I'm in college.
Have you talked to your parents about your learning disability?
Yes, I have talked to my mom about my learning disability. My mom explained to me what my disability was when I was in middle school and that I would receive something called an IEP that gave me accommodations. This helped me do my schoolwork and successfully graduate from high school. I go to college and I chose to self-disclose my learning disability to receive accommodations.
Thank you so much, Alexa Pratt. That was fantastic, and we so appreciate her being able to share that piece of her journey with us today. So when we talk about being able to disclose allows for us, and I shouldn't say for us, for our children, to get accommodations at the workplace and within the community. It also provides legal protection against discrimination, and that's ADA, or the Americans with Disability Act. It gives a clearer impression of expectations people may have for your abilities, and it also ensures that you get what you need to be successful at your job and at your work. It's important to know that you don't have to disclose your disability at college, but you will not be able to receive accommodations without being able to disclose that information. So please keep that in mind, that if you need testing accommodations while you're in school, you will either need to share your IEP, 504 plan, or psychological testing. What I'm going to ask that if your son or daughter is going to go off to college, please remember the IEP does not follow them, but check with the college's Office of Student with Disabilities and find out what information they may need. It might be one of those three things: an IEP, a 504 plan, or a copy of some psychological testing, to be able to receive what appropriate accommodations are. We work very closely with a local community college, and their director of their Students with Disabilities office comes and talks to parents all the time, and they do let us know that if they don't ask for their accommodation 3 days prior to their testing, they won't get it. And it's interesting because she actually, at one of our conferences, said, no one here plans on going to college with their kids. And one parent raised their hand. They said, I am. And we're like, okay, all right, that's your choice. We respect that. But this is, again, practicing in school, where sometimes it's a little safer to make mistakes, asking for your accommodations, then going into college, because they don't really care who's paying the bills at your college. They're only going to talk to the student. So school is a great place to practice asking for what you need to be successful. That's what it is. It's your path to success. Employment and disclosure. Well, disclosure about having a disability, again, it is a personal choice. However, it's important to keep in mind that in order to be eligible for accommodations under the Americans with Disability Act, or ADA, you must tell the potential employer during the interview or shortly after being hired. Otherwise, your window of opportunity for reasonable accommodations on the job closes. If someone got fired because they didn't disclose their disability, it is much harder to go back and explain that you had one. So again, this is an opportunity while our kids are in school to practice being able to disclose what they need to be successful, and your employer is obligated to provide reasonable accommodations for you. Which leads us right into our next slide. Reasonable accommodations in the workplace. These are rights and responsibilities under the law. While IDA is the law that protects students while they're in school, other laws, such as ADA and the Workforce Investment Act, or WIOA, and the Health Insurance Portability Accountability Act and Client Assistant Program, CAP, protects adults when they exit school and enter college and the workforce. So there still are protections for people with disabilities, and you do have a right to reasonable accommodations within the workplace. So WIOA protects individuals from discrimination, and it states, no individual shall be excluded from participation in, denied the benefits of, subjected to discrimination under, or denied employment in the administration or in connection with any such program or activity because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, age, disability, or political affiliation or belief. These are the rights that help our young adults, soon to be adults, out in the world. Now, I believe we're going to have questions in just a few minutes, but we do have another poll. And if everyone can take a look at the poll in the middle of the screen, it says, based on the information shared today, do you feel better prepared to start the conversation with your youth or young adult about their disability? So we have two opportunities to say yes or no. And we're just going to let that go for just another minute or two. They're still coming in. We'll give it another few seconds. Right now we are at 91% for yes and 8.3% for no. Okay. It looks like we're probably finished. I think we might be finished with the poll.
So you will see, this is Dawn again, that if you had said no, please put in the chat box what you feel, resources or supports you feel would be helpful to you to turn that no into a yes. And then, Laura, that was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
I love your stories. I think that they really help to bring reality to some of the situations, and we can relate to them. So if you have a question for Laura, you can go ahead and put it in the chat box, or if you don't want to put it in the chat box, you can raise your hand and we will unmute you. So I see that there is a question, let's see. From Harris, is it best to wait for the child to start asking questions before starting the conversation? My concern is that making a point of bringing it up before our second grader is ready could make him feel self-conscious or different in a negative way, which he does not at this point.
I think that's a great question. So what I'm going to tell you is that I believe us as parents and guardians know our children better than anyone else. So I would say if you feel that right now at second grade they're not asking questions, you're concerned that it may worry them, then I would say then you need to do what you feel is best as a parent at this moment. But I think just even being here today and listening to this, it's on your radar, you're thinking about it, and maybe it's not second grade, maybe it's third grade, maybe it's fourth grade, that you start to have those discussions and how if they're being pulled out for supports and services and they have questions, you can even say, you know, how do you feel about being when you're pulled out? How does that feel? What do you think? But you know your child best. And if you think right now it would not be good for them, then I would say that's okay.
And I agree with you, Laura. And I don't think we have to put a label on it. I think just if you see them struggling, just really starting that conversation with, not everyone is the same. Some are, excel in math and some excel in language arts. And maybe for you, math is a little bit more difficult than it is for Johnny. But this is some of the help you're receiving so that you can do better in math. And I agree, parents know their children. I think this really is meant to start the conversation for you as a parent as well, so that you know that you see the implications of talking to them early on, because it goes all the way into adulthood. Okay, so let's see. We have a question here from someone that says, what do you suggest if a college professor publicly asks the students to raise their hand if they want to go to the testing center for distraction-free testing, even after the students submitted their accommodations letter privately the first day of class?
Oh, I have a lot that I think. No, I think first, you're absolutely right. They submitted that privately. You could practice with the student of talking to their professor and saying, that the reason why I submitted this privately is because I don't feel that I need to disclose to every single person that I'm leaving to take the test, and I would appreciate it if you didn't ask me to raise my hand, that I would go when I needed to leave the room. I think this is a great opportunity to teach this professor a little awareness and sensitivity. And if they don't feel comfortable, I would suggest being able to practice what that conversation may be and how to start that conversation with the college professor. I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add, Dawn. I
agree. I think that, use it as a learning opportunity, that afterwards to go to the professor and have a conversation. I'm not comfortable saying this out loud in front of the whole class, but I did, speak to them privately about it so they understand. And again, this is their self-advocating for themselves. I did want to say, because Felicia's saying she was hoping for more information for young children, like early elementary. Felicia, I would recommend go to our website. We did a webinar in February called Supported Decision Making and Alternatives to Guardianship. Now, you may not be thinking in that area because the child is young, but if you listen through that PowerPoint, there is a section where we talk about different things you can do early on, starting as early as kindergarten, to help build the child's self-advocacy skills and teaching them to make their own decisions. And just so if you check that out, you can download that PowerPoint as well, and there are great suggestions in that PowerPoint. My son just started college. I have suggested he get help from tutoring center. He has not gone yet. Any suggestions?
I would just suggest, I would ask him how he thinks college is going. How does he feel? Does he feel comfortable? How is he doing staying on top of the work? Let him know that your college has an Office of Students with Disabilities. Has he checked it out? I think if he's feeling good and he feels like he doesn't need to go, it's going to be hard because you're paying for college to respect that.
Right.
But I think it's asking him, doing a temperature check. How do you feel? How do you think it's going? How do you feel the workload, the schoolwork? Are you able to keep up? And then just gently suggesting that they do have tutoring centers. They can offer you help and support. Why don't you go and check it out and see what that's like?
Yeah, I agree, Laura, because this is something that, our children without disabilities, struggle with. I have a son in college right now, and it's really hard for me to tell him what to do because I'm so used to doing that. But he has to figure it out on his own. So yeah, as Laura said, if you're struggling, what do you think you should do? Tutoring is a great option. So yeah, it's starting that conversation whether your child has a disability or not. And Felicia, you'll see there that we've put in the link to that webinar that I mentioned earlier, so you can go ahead and download that. Any other questions? So Greg has a question. The little interview with Alex, the student describing her situation, was particularly touching. This is a great presentation, by the way, and is good for us to be hands-off. Is there a way to get more insight directly from the students themselves talking about their situation that our kids can see? Getting info from their peers might make great impact upon other students. I couldn't agree with you more. We talked at the office, all of us, Laura, myself, and others, in collaborating to put this together. And we did not originally start out with a youth voice. And we felt that it would be very impactful to include it, and I'm glad that it was. There are many ways for young people with disabilities to find, I mean, we all could use support, right? We as parents need support, so they need support as well. So there's youth partnerships that they can look for where they can meet up with their peers. So I don't know, Laura, what do you think on that?
No, I think that's great. I think, and again, I keep saying this, but every child is a different journey. And I know this is really hard, because I have a daughter in high school right now, but believe it or not, it's way safer to fail in high school than it is in college or out in the workplace. And being able to let them take some risks, maybe make some decisions, surrounding them with good, supportive friends and family, and knowing that you support their decisions. You don't always have to agree, but right. Being able to and being able to connect them with other students. I think a lot of kids, while you have to keep the confidentiality of an IEP, they sit in class and they don't know who has one. So it's always, being able to reach out to other peers is a great way.
Also, Greg, I'm not sure what state you're in. If you are in New Jersey, we are having a transition conference in 3 different locations throughout the state. And it's for parents, but within that conference, there'll be an opportunity for you to sign your student who is of transition age up, and they will spend a day with other young youth and talk about self-advocacy and their involvement in the IEP process. So I see your email. I will send you that flyer so that maybe if you'd like, you can sign your young person up for that. And Melissa's asking, what support can they get for a student that will not be going on to college, job skills, etc.? My son has so much to offer, but not sure where to go for a chance to prove this.
So, I'm from New York, so I guess I'll kind of speak from New York, and then maybe Dawn, you could kind of speak from New Jersey. Yes. That would probably be helpful. So in school right now in New York State, we have something that's called work-based learning. And in some schools, we actually have work counselors who allow students to go out and just job shadow. But part of the work-based learning is actually the school is tracking, and they put students into opportunities to work in a job and learn skills and learn to be on time and work in groups. And they actually have to track all of this information about quality of work and what does quality of work look like. And we have it anywhere in written form to in a PEC system. So it really reaches all variety of students. So being able to connect them and have them have opportunities to go and have job coaches depending on their need. If they are someone who's been qualified as a person with a developmental disability in New York State, you may have something called service coordination, and they would also be a part of that. So that's for New York State, but Dawn, I'm hoping that you can share in New Jersey.
So the law, there's a transition plan in your IEP, and that is where this should be addressed, because There are, they can be working on community-based instruction and structured learning experiences, and there should be goals and objectives in the IEP and in the transition plan for adult life, whether it is college or going to work. There's different avenues that they can take. So I would definitely bring this up. If they're not working, you know, New Jersey is an employment first state, so everyone is expected to be working. So, and everyone should have the opportunity to work. So if this is something that your child will be doing, that should be stated in the IEP plan, and they should be working on goals and objectives in order for him to be able to do that after high school. Or, you know, and if depending on their disability, they should be staying till they're 21 years of age. Transition goes from 14 to 21. And I did want to mention that Laura talked about this earlier, and I wanted to just also make a comment that, yes, transition states that the student should be invited to the IEP at 14. But, you know, we tell parents all the time, bring them as early as you like. Because, again, that will begin to put them on the path towards self-advocacy. And they don't have to stay for the whole meeting, but they can go for a part of the meeting, and I would get them involved in your planning of the meeting. So the night before, you can sit down and say, you know, we're going to be meeting about you and for your next calendar school year, and let's talk about what are your favorite subjects, what are you struggling with, what, you know, and include them in their goals and objectives. So, you know, we talk about putting quote unquote I goals and objectives in so that they're a part of it, and it can be eventually become a student run IEP. So I will make sure that I come to class on time, and then break that down so that there are benchmarks and it can be measurable, because they can take ownership of that goal. So I hope that answered your question. So do we have any other questions? Some great resources people are putting on, which is wonderful. I thank you for that. I think some more people are typing, and as you can see, we've put some resources up along with what we gave you in the file section. We have some great resources here. These are wonderful websites where you can get some support and help on how to work. That Parent Center Hub has lots, it's chock full of information for parents. Yes, you can share everything with whoever, you can share the resources with whoever you'd like, Anne-Marie. So we will, as we said earlier, this is being recorded and it will be on our website, and we will email everyone on Eventbrite with that link to the recording. See if I left anything out. So it doesn't look like there's any more questions. Anything you'd like to end with, Laura? I think this was great. I just love that we're beginning this conversation and parents can start talking to their child, their youth, and professionals as well, because you see, you know, what happens as an adult and how it can affect their adult life.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for allowing me to share this information, and thank you everyone for taking the time out of your day to join us. And please share this. This is important for other people to use and share, and we're all about sharing. So
yes, absolutely, it's all about, you know, all we want to do is provide you with information. So as a reminder, which has also been typed, when you leave this room, you will be forwarded to our evaluation. Please complete that. It really does help us to bring you more great information. So thank you for joining us. I think this was a great discussion. I'm really happy with it. Laura, thank you so much. I think it was great. And we look forward to our next webinar. Well, hopefully you'll be joining us then.